Welcome to the Bigger, Braver Life show, where leaders and high performers learn to rewire their minds, regulate their nervous systems, and rise into their next evolution. I'm Angela Williams, therapist, leadership coach, and your guide to living, leading, and creating from deep alignment. Because your bigger, braver life isn't about doing more, it's about becoming more of who you really are. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm really excited about our guest today, Denise Duffield-Thomas. I am a personal fan of her work, and I was just telling her about how I love her books, which we're going to talk about in the interview today. But Denise Duffield-Thomas is the money mentor for the new wave of online entrepreneurs who want to make money and change the world. She helps entrepreneurs like you charge premium prices, release the fear of money, and create first-class lives. So her books, Lucky Bitch, Get Rich Lucky Bitch, and her newest, Chill and Prosper, give a fresh and funny roadmap to living a life of abundance without burnout. Her Money Bootcamp has helped over 10,000 students from all around the world. She's a lazy introvert, a Hay House author, and an unbusy mother of three. She lives on the east coast of sunny Australia with her family and two fur babies. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, Denise, I would love to start off, as I do most of my interviews, with asking you how you came about living your bigger, braver life.
Well, I think as a kid, I really had that desire to have more. And, I grew up with a really young single mom, and we had quite a chaotic kind of life, moving around a lot. And I saw my mom often in situations where she didn't have a lot of power, especially economic power. And my mom, my aunties, my grandmother, they were always kind of like saying to me as the oldest grandchild, like, you have to make your own money and you have to do your own stuff and don't trust a man, is what they would say to me. Great message from a young age. But and so I kind of had that instilled in me of wanting something different. And I think a big influence for me early on was watching Oprah Winfrey's show After School, which aired in Australia. And I think she instilled that idea in me of like, break the cycle, do something different than your family did, then you can do that. And then in my teens, I randomly started reading personal development books. And because the answer to that is I would lose my keys all the time and I'd be locked out of my house until my mum came home from. And so after school, I would go to this bookstore, the secondhand bookstore near my house for hours and just read books. And I found this little personal development book called The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. And it was one of those first moments that I thought, oh my God, I can change these thoughts that are running in my head and this anxiety or these thoughts that I'm not good enough. And that was another seed that planted this desire for something more. So I could almost say, oh, well, it was inevitable that I was going to create this success, but it wasn't easy. I had to overcome so many imposter syndrome barriers and loneliness and feeling like I had to do it all by myself. So I think though it was that innate desire for me of how I do this work now is that I would go to school after watching Oprah and say, oh my God, Oprah said this. And then I'd read a book and say, I read this book and you need to read it too. And so it was kind of inevitable that I would go into coaching or mentoring other people because that's how I've always been. Just, I've learned this thing and let me share it with you. And so, yeah, I think that's how I've kind of got here to this big, bold life. However, I would say now where I'm personally building it is being really intentional about my desires and going back to doing ballet in my 40s and really trying to be more authentic in my life of what works for me and what makes me happy. That's how I'm doing it at the moment.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We actually have some of those similar storylines when Oprah was actually a big influence for me as well. I have a podcast episode that is an ode to Oprah and her, just watching her do such big things and, the personal development that she shared with other people in her own journey. That's very inspiring to me. So I totally get that. also an avid reader. And I think those things just really unlock so much curiosity and learning and really expand your world. You don't have to really go a lot of places if you have those books because you can do so much. And so, anyways, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love how you shared, there's mindset pieces too on your journey to success. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit more too. Can you talk to me about your journey and how you overcame kind of maybe the mental barriers or blocks that imposter syndrome? I think a lot of us, especially as women, face that. But can you talk to me about your specific solutions for that?
Absolutely. It's funny you're reading my book, Chill and Prosper, at the moment, because the first version of that came out in 2019. And it was originally called Chillpreneur, too, by the way. It had a name change. And I was, at that time when I wrote it, I was undiagnosed with ADHD, which I've had my whole life. And that definitely has set up so much imposter syndrome because as a kid, it was always, and my mum has undiagnosed ADHD too. I was never prepared, never had the right things, was always lost. So I had this sense that, wow, there's something wrong with me and I'm so disorganized and I'm not worthy and I'm undeserving of good things because I turned up to my exam without a calculator and a pen. All of those things that are so hard, especially then also growing up, with not much money and not having the right clothes. All of those early experiences can be so hard, I think, for those internal feelings. So definitely Oprah and some of those books helped. But actually in my early 20s, randomly I was working somewhere and the secretary who was just doing some temp work for us said, have you ever heard of EFT? And I was like, no, but tell me more. And this was probably early 2000s and YouTube wasn't really a thing. And so she had to lend me her DVDs to learn how to do EFT, which is amazing now that it's so accessible. You can learn it. You can literally YouTube or Google EFT for any problem that you have. And that was a real game changer for me, I think, because I was trying to change my thoughts, but my body was so full of anxiety all of the time. I was constantly in fight or flight. I'm going to get into trouble. So I would be sweating all the time at work, thinking, I'm going to get into trouble. Something bad's going to happen. And EFT was the first practice that actually did calm my nervous system down. And those of you who have never heard of it before, it's called EFT, tapping emotional freedom technique. And it's just this form of self acupressure that you can do. And you tap as you say a mantra. And it might be, even though I feel really nervous, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And I had to do so much work just on, even though I'm not good enough, even though I'm like bad at things, whatever it was, even though I have this fear, it really, really helped me. And I still use this today, by the way. If I'm doing a speaking gig, I need to do it. And my 7-year-old, she's about to do some public speaking, and we've been doing it together too. And she's like, even though I feel really nervous, even though my heart's racing, that was the first thing for me. And I've tried a lot of different modalities, and I think everything does work. But for me, that is my go-to, 25 years later, I still use that.
Thank you for sharing that. In my practice, we did a lot of EFT during COVID. Actually, we had a specific protocol that we were given in the kind of trauma group that I work in. And so, yeah, people did find that that reduced their stress. And so I have a different go-to method with my clients and myself. But EFT is a little bit more accessible, right? Because you can kind of do it wherever, whenever, type of thing. And so thank you for sharing that because I always want to highlight different ways because some ways will not work for some folks and some people prefer different. And we haven't had anyone talk about EFT actually on the show yet. So that's very exciting that that still works for you and being able to
Yes.
set yourself up for success during stressful moments, where we have a little bit more heightened anxiety and that you're passing that tool on to your child. I think that's so great. So many.
Oh, yes. All my kids know how to do it because I started doing it just in front of them. And my oldest daughter, who's 11 now, at 18 months, she was just kind of copying me and she would be
Yes.
nodding along. And so we added that in. I would say too, the other thing that EFT really helped me with I developed trichotillomania as a kid, which is hair pulling for those of you who don't know. And it was quite severe, but my mom didn't really want to get me diagnosed with it because she was really scared, I think, of alerting, authorities that her kids had anxiety. She was really worried about, us being taken away from her or being an unfit parent, especially being so young. And I had that up until my early 20s or mid 20s, I would say. And EFT helped me, hypnotherapy helped me, kinesiology helped me as well, all of the things. So I also want people to hear too that there's no amount of money that fixes all of those things. Some of my trauma from my childhood actually didn't come up for me until I made money because I didn't have any bandwidth to even look at it. And even now, I have to do a couple of times a year. I have to do a bit of a tune up on stuff, but I see someone every single month to do tapping and mindset work because it does live within you and it is part of your journey forever. There's no end point where you go, oh, I'm so successful, all of my things are fixed. And yeah, even some of my successes actually like unveiled some of that and showed me how deep some of my patterns are too.
And you know what? That's so common. And that's something that, that's what I really work with in my clients is how do we understand those subconscious issues that are really kind of latent and that, these money subjects, the success, the pressure, all of the stress, right? All of that's going to activate in different levels, whatever's there. And so it's important to understand who you are, what's your lived experience, what your beliefs are, and then make sure that you have the support to regulate your nervous system, expand your capacity, your nervous system, being able to hold a larger amount of money or a large amount of clients or whatever that may look like. So yeah, I'm beating that drum all day. So I totally appreciate you sharing that. Can you talk about maybe the most important things that you've done to help expand your capacity when it comes to money and maybe some of the beliefs that you had to shift? I believe you have reported a larger amount of financial success, right, in the coaching space. And so, can you talk to us a little bit more about how you kind of expanded your capacity and kind of anchored up, if you will, to receive that?
Yes. No, I love that you used the word anchor because I think that is really, really important. Because especially if you're new to the personal development world at the start, you just go, oh my God, this is amazing. It really pulls you forward from a motivational piece, but actually being able to anchor those in, making that a new part of your experience, whether it's habits, beliefs, whatever, will really, really help you to keep it. If you look at lottery winners, for example, so many people who have won the lottery, I think the studies say within 5 years, most of them are back where they were for so many different reasons, because the money can amplify your underlying sabotages. So one of my very early experiences when I started my business was that I registered my new business with the council and they said, oh, do you know that every new business can go and see a tax officer for free? And so I went and I was sweating and shaking going into this meeting. And it was, it's just like this little accountant dude, like working for the tax office. And I came away from that meeting, I was terrified. And I had to go back and go, what's happening in this experience for me? Because I know this will be a block for me growing my business. And it was me at 5 years old being at the welfare office with my mum. And he was asking my mum all these questions. And I was going, oh, but remember, we lived in this place. And my mum was like, shut up. And I really felt her fear of this official in the government that had the power to decide our fate. Are we going to get food stamps or not? Are we going to get, welfare or not? And I had to do some work for that inner child
Oh, yeah.
because I was terrified of the tax man.
Right.
I think that's a common thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was serious. And there were also these ads in Australia in the 80s of like the Grim Reaper. And
Mm.
so in my mind, the tax man and the Grim Reaper and like the sheriff of Nottingham and like And also Australia being a penal colony of England where we got sent if, you stole a loaf of bread. All of this stuff was living inside me, right?
Right.
And I had to acknowledge that because I was terrified of paying tax and getting into trouble with the government.
Right.
That is a big deal for so many of us, is that we're so worried about getting into trouble. And this is why I see when I hear people are stuck and they have an income plateau, the first question I ask is, are you under a tax bracket?
Mm.
Do you have to start charging tax? Like, when sometimes you reach a threshold and now you have to charge your customers sales
Mhm.
tax. I see people, they get stuck under those because they're worried about getting into trouble, doing something wrong. That's a really big one. Or just below a threshold where they would have to lose a benefit, lose alimony, lose a child benefit, whatever it is, because it's a real sense of safety,
Right.
not wanting to be known, not wanting to put yourself into trouble, like potential trouble. So that was a really big one at the start of my business, and I see it a lot.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. From my perspective, I see a lot of the past experiences, kind of like you mentioned, but just kind of in different formats. Like, what did our family members, were they hoarders of money? Were they, just spending, spending, spending? And, what was that? What was taught to you? What was passed down to you? And like, so just a lot of the family origin. But I think it was so important that you mentioned the societal piece as well, because that does play a big role. We associate, right? The pictures we see, the messages we get, it's all connected. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, the family patterns thing is really fascinating. So there's this saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And this is what happens sometimes when someone creates big success, especially if they're self-made. So it's like, they're the hard workers, and then they want their kids to go to university, and then their grandkids are like trust fund babies, and they're the ones that lose it. And I definitely see those patterns playing out in my clients where they either unwittingly repeat the behavior. And let's take frugality, for example,
Sure.
extreme frugality, right? You'll see people who unwittingly just follow that along, and they live scarce, frightened lives of like, we're not allowed to take any risks. Or they go the other way, right? And then they're like, I never want to think about money. I never want to penny pinch. I never want to save. I'm just going to, spend it. And that's when the extremes come, right? Or you go into the healthy side where you go, okay, I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to appreciate some of those lessons. And I'm not going to go into extremes. I'm going to find my healthy medium. And even though I didn't grow up with around frugality, I actually grew up kind of in the opposite way, where my mum, yes, she was on welfare, but she was just like this insanely lucky person who would manifest these windfalls out of the blue, but then she would spend them very quickly. So I was very at ease in this feast or famine. Oh, money's going to come, like no big deal. I have to learn sustainability. And so, like, when people used to say, oh, how much have you got in savings? I was going, savings? Why would you need savings for? You just get another job, take another shift, live week by week. I
Right.
was
Just make
never
more.
worried about just make more money, right? And I even like, even at university, I would take on jobs that were open 24/7 because I'd be like, well, I'll just take another shift. I never got taught to create a safety net. And even in those early days where I was like, maybe I will try saving, there was something that would always come where I'd feel like I'd have to spend it all. I'd be like, oh, well, I've got a little bit extra. I need to get rid of it. And that's a really big thing I see too, is just being safe with more than enough, being safe with excess. Because if you're worried that you'll fall into your patterns of like giving it away, spending it, frittering it away, taking a big risk, then you'll see people, they'll say to me, oh no, that doesn't work for me. If I'm too comfortable, the muse disappears, my creativity disappears. And I believed that for a long time too, right? I was like, I need to be motivated by impending doom.
Right.
And what does
Right.
that do? What does that do to your body, right? And so now I sometimes I have to watch myself. I get a little bit itchy. I go, everything's going too well. How can I like burn this down, right? And I go, No, 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 no. And that's what I'm trying to create for my kids too. I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool for them to have like a boring middle class upbringing? I don't aspire for them to create this massive big wealth. I thought I did. I thought that was like, wow, I'm going to live this big life and I'm going to inspire my kids to. And I'm like, oh, that's actually not what my lineage needs. My lineage needs a couple of generations where maybe it's like, oh, we can just live normal lives. We don't have
Stabilize.
to
Yeah.
live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's so hard for me to do it
Yeah.
because I'm still trying to overcome that other stuff and try and do it, create, nice nervous systems for them.
Right.
It's a really tricky place to be. I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that when you're
Oh,
still in it.
100%.
Yeah.
And, I've been on other podcasts too where we've had this conversation about, being very intentional about the mindset that we want to create for our kids. I mean, my child's only about to be 2, so, but really,
Yeah.
I mean, think about how early we're making connections. And I mean, he's learning all of the time. So I'm like, let me be intentional even now about the messages that I want to share and the energy that I want to have around money instead of, oh, there's a huge bill, freak out, and then, panic and, have my nervous system, go all over the place. So, yeah, I think that
Yep.
that is the part of the work, right? Is being able to stabilize ourselves and pass that on.
Yeah, it's tricky, especially too, because I've got siblings who I kind of feel responsible for their stuff too. And they've had their challenges. And also I financially support my mom, right? Which, any therapist has a absolute field day with that one. And so I am the child, the adult in a lot of relationships in my life. And I feel like talking about that honestly and openly too, if you're someone who is very giving and generous, more money is not going to take that away, but you have to watch the balance, right? Of going, oh, okay, now I'm responsible for everybody because I have money. I see that a lot. And I have that in myself too, as
Hmm.
that oldest child syndrome of going, everything's my responsibility and I have to fix every problem of the world.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that because I'm an oldest daughter as well. So I feel like we're an archetype in our own sense there.
We are.
I do think that there's a lot of similarities in that role is you want to support and you want to take charge and you want to, do all these things and it is a good intention, but also, yeah, we've got to figure out the balance and again, stabilizing, everything you can, for your family as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing that. I also would love to just kind of, maybe add on that when you think about your journey to making more money with ease. I'm reading the book Chill and Prosper. What I love about it is, you talk about making your life so much easier. And I think that's something else that through my life was also, seeing other people, family members, and it's like, okay, how can we make everything easier? And so that's something that I like to talk about and also in my personal journey, it's like how do we make things easier, not only in our business, but also about making money easier, right? Because I think you said it perfectly in the book. Of course, I didn't quote it, but it was like we make things so much harder than it has to be. And how can we, take steps to simplify? Tell me a little bit more about just that ease, bringing in ease. That's what I'm working on with my clients too.
Yes.
Is how do we bring in more ease?
So I wrote it pre-diagnosis and I realized so many of my coping mechanisms and advice in there was because of ADHD. There's a whole chapter called Keyless Life, and it's about how can you make your life as automated as possible. One of the examples I use is that I have electronic keypads on all of my doors. And I've renovated a lot of houses and our contractors always push back on it and say, no, no, they don't work. And oh, it's fine, just have keys. And I'm going, you do not understand. I have so much trauma from being a kid and being locked out of places in my 20s, having to sit outside in London because wait for my flatmates to come home. I cannot carry keys. I just cannot. And so I took that philosophy to go, okay, how else in my business can I do this? And so I look at everything in my life and my business. And sometimes it's not about putting something into place. Sometimes it's actually about eliminating things. And so sometimes that is having a really good look at your offerings and going, I don't want to do that anymore. Or that doesn't work for me like that anymore. So I used to do very early mornings and very late evenings, especially when I was doing one-to-one, because I thought, I'm in Australia, most of my clients are in Europe and America, I have to be accommodating. And I was just burning myself out. And that is a great example of going, instead of thinking, how can I increase my stamina? How can I take more vitamins? It was like, no, I'm just not going to offer that anymore.
Exactly.
Email stresses me out, right? So it's like, what can I automate? Anything that you can automate in terms of your finances, bookkeeping. There's so many tools pretty much for everything, but that's the idea of a keyless life. Even just looking at your house and going, what are some stresses that come into my house? And so it could be like, we have an automatic ice maker. So it's just like, there will be ice. So I'm always just thinking, what can I do to make things easy, automated? I think the way to do it too is to go, what is stressing me out at the moment? What causes me the most friction? What causes me the most amount of stress? I actually find for a lot of women, it's not work, it's home, especially if you have kids. And I think, especially for kids who have a traumatic upbringing, those things feel so stressful to us all the time. And so systems help to try and keep us as calm as possible. When I was really building my empire, I hired more people at home than I did in my business because laundry stressed me out. Deciding what to eat every day stressed me out. And you can acclimatize your way into it. So, I know in America, especially, there are so many of those meal delivery systems, and, that's fine, especially when you're in empire building mode, right?
That makes a lot of
And
sense, right? Because
yeah,
all of your resources are being focused on the building phase versus the coasting phase, right? So, yeah, that makes so much sense. I think the other thing that stood out for me in that chapter was thinking about the business layout. I don't know if you did the human design, but manifesting
yes,
generator, I love to do, and I love new things all the time, but like launching is exhausting. So, I'm like, okay, we're going to have to figure out how to simplify and make it a little boring for a hot minute. And then I have flexibility to put in new stuff if I want, but yeah, the launching all the time, I'm like, no, that's got to go. So that's what I redid.
I think that's a really important conversation. I love human design. I love money archetypes as well. I love any kind of archetypal kind of thing. But I also think not every business model works for every personality type. Sometimes you need more variety, sometimes you need more certainty. And that's such a huge part of it. And it's maybe not forever. Like for me, actually traveling and doing speaking gigs is not it's not fun at this phase of my life. It's stressful to try and organize the logistics, let alone all of the global unrest that's happening. I realized my nervous system can't handle even a speaking gig that's a year away, thinking about all the bad things that could happen. And so some things you will just go, what doesn't work for me in this phase of life? Maybe in the future. And when my husband came into the business, he was like, "Oh, you're leaving all this money on the table. You could be running a mastermind. So many people email." And I was like, "But I that doesn't work for me right now."
Yeah. I think we get in this, we're chasing money, a little bit and stressing ourselves out in the process and ignoring the actual thing we want to do or
Yeah.
things that we don't want to do. So I think that was a very conversation.
Or we think that the delivery has to be a certain way because of our industry or whatever. And I think the pandemic did show a lot of people who felt like, oh no, I have to do this in person. No, you don't.
Right.
And that's really key too, is giving yourself permission to build your business in a way that works for you, even if other people don't understand it. And even if some people don't like it, because you're only looking for the clients who like that. And I think this or nothing, a big part of my early journey was dancing. That was such a great part of my life that really helped me with all the chaos of my childhood. But it taught me the show must go on. And I took it a little bit too far where I was like, I never canceled anything. I was never sick. Even in the depths of depression or mental breakdown, I was like, I am here for you. That is not healthy to do that. We're allowed to create our businesses to be a vehicle to support ourselves and our family and help other people, but it has to be based on you and your preferences first, or it will not be sustainable.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so helpful to hear that from somebody who has made it to the other side. You know what I mean? You've kind of been through that journey and then you're on the other side and you can share that back as wisdom where people, kind of are going through it.
Yeah.
Also notice, throughout the conversation, you've mentioned the ways that you've evolved and the ways that you are really now being intentional about your desires and your health and like all of those things. And I think, sometimes we have to learn from experience, but if you were to share one bit of advice about that, what would that be?
Oh, yes. I think it's so tricky, right? Because we obviously want to help as many people as possible. And also, as we create more success, we want to be able to help our friends and our family and all that kind of stuff. And I think I've learned some really hard lessons about that in the last couple of years of you can't always fix other people's problems with money, with whatever. And that's a bitter pill to swallow when you want to take people with you. And my lesson is I am not responsible for everyone. And I had to do some almost woo woo energetic work in untangling some of the relationships I had with people in my life because I felt like, I'm like with my mom, especially because she's only 17 years older than me. I had to untangle things and go, okay, maybe in past lives, in past lives, I was the mom, you were the
Right,
child. In
right.
this life, in this
Yep.
life, I am the child,
Mhm.
you are my parent.
Mhm.
I didn't say this to her. I just had to energetically do it. And I saw it as like all these tanglements. And I was just like, I'm just going to untangle them. And that's pretty much what I've been doing this last year is renegotiating things.
Mm.
Even a friend of mine reminded me, we went to this goddess conference years ago and she said, oh, you pulled the nun card. And I went, oh my God, this is what I've been doing of going, I'll dedicate myself and everyone else can have, and I'm not allowed to experience pleasure or,
Mhm.
whatever for myself.
Right.
And I was getting it through my business, but not necessarily my personal life.
Mhm.
My business was my pleasure.
Right.
And
Right.
so I had to then go, okay, I am revoking all of my vows of chastity, modesty, whatever
Right.
lifetimes, right?
Right.
I'm like, no, that is not a thing
Mhm.
anymore, And I'm like, I knew how to create success, but I actually didn't really know how to have true pleasure in my life. I started cross stitching again for pleasure, and it's still a balance. I'm not saying it's not. And I had to have a bit of an ego death of going, I don't want to tell people about this because they're going to think I'm not ambitious or worthy of,
Right.
you know, reading my book or whatever. If I'm just like, oh God, I'm just a mum in the suburbs, like going to ballet and doing my cross stitch.
But I think that's such a common story that I hear with female entrepreneurs specifically too, is that, my business is fun and it is, and it's so great. And we get to be creative and problem solving and so many things, nurturing, right? We get to do a lot of things in our
Yep.
business, but having true pleasure and joy, like that is a lot of the what's missing, right, for us. And so, we are all complex beings and we need to make sure that we're taking care of our mind, body, spirit, right? All of those things. So I do appreciate you sharing that because it is so important to make sure that we are truly balancing with the joy, and the work that we're doing. So we're
Yes.
wrapping up, but I do want to ask you just anything that you want to share about your book writing journey. A lot of the folks that listen in, myself included, are inspired to write a book or in that process. So can you share anything?
Oh,
Tips,
geez.
fun.
I know. So I am not a prolific writer and I need very, very strong deadlines to be able to write. And that's just how I was at school as well. I always did my assignments last minute. So when I wanted to write my first business book, Lucky Bitch, the only way I did it was I set a deadline, and it was a really dumb thing to do because I was like, 7th of September 2011, which was my birthday, I will be releasing Lucky Bitch. So pre-order here or get on the wait list here. And I had not finished writing that book. So I had to write it in 2 weeks. I was like, ah! And I self-published it, and it was half written in British English and American English. So both people were pissed off at the typos, and it was a very imperfect book, but it was birthed.
Love it.
And
Yeah.
the cool thing, yes, yeah, you will just do it, right? If you have a
Yep.
deadline,
Get
I
it
will
done.
never let anyone down.
Yeah.
But I've let myself down so many times with projects that I have wanted to do because I didn't have any external accountability. And then the second book came out the year after Get Rich Lucky Bitch, both self-published, again with a very strong deadline. And then Hay House contacted me 2015 and said, we've been reading your newsletter to pitch you, internally. And they didn't like the word bitch in my books. But I knew it was like a bit, not an excuse, but I was kind of like, oh, okay, this has been a really great experience. I'm going to go away and build my numbers basically. And it's a hard pill for people to swallow sometimes. You can have a really good book idea, but traditional publishers, they want to see that you can sell books and that you have social media numbers, newsletter numbers, all of that kind of stuff. And I really got that. And I went back and changed a few things in my business. My company name was Lucky Bitch at the time. I changed it back just to my name and built my Instagram, built my Facebook, all of that stuff. So I went and pitched them 2 years later and said, I've got this new idea for a book. It's called Chillpreneur. And you can also republish those other books for free and take those on. And that's what they did. There's a couple of lessons in that. One is create when no one's watching, because that builds the momentum. There were times, very early on where I was like, I don't know what to put in the newsletter this week, but I did it every week without fail. Send out a newsletter. And you've got to think too, like, it's going out to potentially millions of people, thousands of people. Not, well, there's no point sending a newsletter because there's only 30 people on my list. It's like, well, how are you going to get more people on your list?
That's a really good
And so,
reframe. Yeah.
however, the book that I sold to Hay House, I knew that I would really struggle at that phase in my life with 3 young kids to do it in 2 weeks, in the final 2 weeks. And I think they gave me like 9 months or something to write it, which with ADHD, I'm always just like, just tell me the deadline. I don't care how long things will take. Just tell me the deadline and I'll just magically make it happen. But I knew that would be very stressful. So I actually spent most of my advance on a book accountability mentor. And every week I'd send her a chapter. She'd send me feedback. And I felt really grown up. I was like, oh my God, look at me getting things done on time. This is so cool. It was a really nice new experience. So I've written books all sorts of ways. There's no right or wrong or good or bad. I feel like you have to get over that imposter syndrome, I think, of, am I worthy of writing a book? And I look back at that book, Lucky Bitch, right? And I think I really sometimes want to change it all because it's naive in some places. And it's, I don't know, it's not what I would write now.
Sure.
But that's the point.
Right.
People
Right.
need that version of me who wrote that, who was a little bit naive and, kind of like, oh, it's just going to manifest, because that's what happened when I followed that naivete, right? So if I tried to do it now, I would ruin it.
Yeah.
So you can only write the book of where you are right now. You can't think, oh no, I should be further ahead, because that further ahead version, they won't remember the lessons that are so present to you right now.
Right.
I've also attempted a few times to write a memoir, and that's been really difficult, a new genre, but I will join a memoir group where we have to speak it out loud to each other. And that's a really good learning edge, and you notice that everyone feels like an imposter, even people who have written multiple books as I have. I still feel like an imposter. So that's not a good enough reason to not do it. And if you self-publish, it is a completely valid path that could lead to traditional publishing later on, or not. The thing I love about self-publishing is that you can change it, whereas traditional publishing, it takes so long to do stuff. So there's no either or. I think I'm a good example of that. Of my self-published books are published with my same publisher. So just pick a deadline and just do it.
I love it. Thank you. That's lovely. And yes, really good reframes. And, I think about just again, your evolution, that was that part of you then. This is the part of you now. And it's all there. I love it.
Yeah. There is a lot of inner child work I think we always have to do as we go on our journey. And I have to do it all the time.
Yeah.
So don't feel like, oh, I'm too flawed to be successful. It's like, why not you? We all are.
Yes. Thank you so much. So tell everyone where they can find you.
Yes, I'm very easy to find. DeniseDT.com is my website, and there's a ton of resources on there around money blocks or finding out your money archetype. There's a lot of things in there. My podcast, Chill and Prosper, if people prefer to listen, that comes out every week on all the normal platforms. And same with my books. You can find they're on Audible, they're on Kindle, they're on paperback. And then I love to connect with people on social media. So if you prefer being on, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, just search me. Denise DT is usually my handle on most platforms. And I love hearing money stories. So always feel free to DM me and, tell me your money story or just connect on social media.
Wonderful. Denise, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show. And just one
My
more shout out,
pleasure.
y'all. You got to read the books. She gives great information on her website. I think I've been in a challenge or two of yours, but just so lovely. And just following you on social media is fun. Like Denise is a fun reminder of like who we get to be, who we get to choose to be. We get to be our authentic self and we get to have fun, be silly, do whatever. So thank you for sharing that example. And yeah, all right, that is going to conclude our interview for today. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a
Thanks.
wonderful rest of your day.
You're not here for surface level success. You're here to expand. Visit angelamaria.co, where you'll find retreats, private coaching, and resources to expand your capacity and lead with calm, clarity, and authority. If this conversation moved you, make sure to share it with a leader who's ready for more.